Absolutely. Our panel participants, we're so happy to have them on and humbled. Dr. Adrienne Castorina, who is the District Supervisor, Special Education at Sparta Township Public Schools. Jack DeWitt, Director of Student Services, Glen Ridge Public Schools. And Chris Casamento, Case Resources Teacher, New Brunswick Public Schools. So we will next introduce our panel from New Jersey. The partnership team, Lindsay Foglio, Partnership Manager, South Central New Jersey, Sheila Miller, Partnership Manager, North New Jersey, David Hanslick, Partnership Manager, and Matt Ferry, Partnership Manager, both supporting and serving the great teachers and great students of New Jersey. And my name is David Cicero. I will be your host today and moderator. Let's jump into the first question, and we'll get to know our special guests, our panelists, and be learning a whole lot moving forward. Panel question 1. This is for Dr. Castorina. It's pretty general. It doesn't have to do specifically with special education, but just in general, what has changed since you moved to remote learning? What's working? What have you had to adjust? Dr. Castorina, are you able to hear me?
Yep, I just had to unmute myself. Hi, thank you.
Hi.
So, the obvious is what has changed, just not being face-to-face with our students, whether it's special ed, general education as well. That's the obvious, that we can't see our students in person. We're seeing them online on the computer, but certainly that's been a huge change for us and a huge adjustment in our district, as well as I'm sure every other district in the state. We're not able to see the students, and so we are trying hard to connect with them online. What is working? I would say I'm pleasantly surprised at the technology. At first we were nervous that the systems would crash and we wouldn't be able to do what we needed to do for our students. And I will say we're a Google district, so we have, we use Google Docs, Google Classroom, Google Sheets, etc. And so we've been using Google Hangout as our main avenue to teach, to instruct our students. And so that's working really well. We haven't had a lot of issues with kids freezing on the screen or not being able to access the teachers. And so that's been great. In addition to that, in terms of adjusting, we've adjusted our school hours. So for our middle and high school, we typically start at about 7:30, and so during the time that we're home, we've done a delayed opening schedule. So instead of the kids having to log on at 7:30, we're having them log on at about 9 o'clock, and so that's, I think, worked well, because those students especially, I think, are the ones that may be staying up late, perhaps on video games or chats or whatever else they're doing. And so for them to be able to sleep in, we've adjusted our schedule for that. We've also had to adjust just the whole technology piece for our younger students. So I'm a supervisor pre-K through 12, and we've used Google Hangouts. We've used Google Classroom for our middle and high school students pretty consistently, as well as our 4-5 building. But our younger kiddos, they don't have as much experience on the Google Classrooms and using email. And so we've really had to adjust in that respect. All of our teachers now have Google Classrooms, whereas we all had them in the past, but weren't using them as much at the elementary level. So those are just a few examples of the ways in which we've adjusted over the past few weeks.
What a response. Fantastic. Jack DeWitt, what say you here? What's changing and what's working for you all?
I think I would reiterate pretty much everything that was just said. I think that what we found working is my staff has been fantastic. The child study team has been great. The support from our community has been great. I think that's what is kind of changed, and what's working is our level of communication. One of the things that I've adjusted, and I'm also in I'm in a pre-K to 12 school district. There's about 1,900 students in the district. We have various programs. what's changed and what I found is working is increasing the level of communication for us. Whereas I would meet with my child study team members every 2 weeks to discuss cases and students and programs and things like that. We started out meeting twice a week. We've just now gone back to, we're in spring break, but for next week, we'll go to once a week. I've set up meetings for my special ed teachers where normally they would have grade level or building level meetings. And, I would meet with them, maybe once a year in my role. But I'm now meeting with them every week, same thing, to open the line of communication. What do they find is working? What are they not working? We are across 5 buildings, so it can be a bit of a challenge. We opened a new building this year, which is just preschool. Our other 2 are pre-K through 2. We have an upper elementary that's a 3 to 6 and a junior senior high school is 7 to 12. So I've set up meetings at those levels just to make sure everyone is on the same page. Making sure that, I was seeing emails come from our upper elementary and some great resources that they found or how they were finding things working, but the communication wasn't always going down to the other buildings just because they don't communicate. They really don't have a need to. So I've set up meetings where we have them together, set up Google folders where I'm sharing our resources together, things like that, just so we are in a higher level of communication than we were in the past. Not that we weren't. I believe in communication, and it's something that we've worked very hard on over the last 5 years to adjust, but also doing that with the parents too. I've been sending out a weekly email to the parents on what's going on, just like at the building level. They do receive one. I've been sending out one for all of the students that have IEPs. They're, the parents, sending one to them, what's going on, what changes. I put together a video for them last week just going into spring break to let them know that everyone was thinking about them. We called it My 3 Words, but it's really just increasing our communication, even with my CPAC, my my special education, Special Education Parent Advocacy Council. That group, I talk with them on a weekly or bi-weekly basis where, I would have quarterly check-ins with them, if something was needed, but I've ramped that up just so we were all on the same page, because I find not being in the school, we're not able to communicate like we normally would. It's, it's a little disjointed. So we've really adjusted communication, I think, has been the key for us so far.
Absolutely. Quick follow-up question. I would imagine with increasing communication, there's increase in insights, learning more about people, more about students. Do you find that, number one, or are you finding that, number one? And number two, things going back to normal, kids arriving back at brick and mortar, do you try to keep that same level of communication now that you've rolled it out that way?
But I'm sorry, the first question, I know the second was going back, but
right,
what was
are you
the first
gaining
question?
new insights? Are you finding that increase in communication, you're learning a lot more than you did before, right? It's benefiting you greatly, right? And then second, do you keep it the same when school comes back, let's say? Do you try to keep that same, or do you think it's going to benefit you moving forward?
So I would say, do I have new insights? I have a wonderful staff. I really do. I don't say that because they are wonderful. They're supportive. They're great. Everything we ask them to do, they've been pretty good at, even with the change. The insights I think I've gotten are, the people that are not as tech savvy have jumped onto things, and people that were maybe not have taken more of a leadership role, some of the teachers, in helping out, supporting other teachers. I have 2 maternity leave replacements that just started about 3 weeks ago, and I've had people swoop in to help them. So it's interesting to see from a administrator's role how people have stepped up and supported other people. Will I keep them the same? Not parents, but all of my staff has my cell phone number. I always tell them, just text me and we'll talk. So I've had a pretty good relationship. I don't know that I could keep up this level of communication eventually when we get back,
Sure,
because
sure.
I'm normally busy, but this has been more to keep them all on the same page. I think we'll take aspects of it and continue with it. I just don't know that, meeting with them, that, the things that they're not doing child study team wise, for example, maybe not doing testing now. They're having more questions about how to run IEP meetings virtually, what resources we could find for our students, those kind of things. So I think some of it will change. I think some of it, we found some great programs that we've started to use, and I think those things will stick with us. But I think the communication has always been there. It's just now ramped up to a whole new level for us.
Thank you for that. Let's go on to the second question here, a little more specific. What challenges, Dr. Castorina, what challenges are you facing providing special education, and how are you meeting those challenges?
So some of the challenges that we're facing, as most of you probably know, related services we were not able to provide them when all of this started. So we were kind of waiting to receive guidance from the state. And so then slowly we were given the ability to provide speech and counseling. And now we can provide occupational therapy and physical therapy. And so that's posed a challenge, because when we started creating our remote learning schedules, we did not include those related services. We included, skill-based websites and contacts through these service providers, but not the, once a week small group or individual sessions that now we're trying to squeeze in or figure out a way to get them in. So that's been a challenge. We have to make sure the parents are allowing us to provide those services. And so there's a lot of preparation that went into that in order to make that work. In addition to that, we have teacher assistants / paraprofessionals in the district. And it's been a challenge to figure out ways to incorporate them into the remote learning. So, we may have a class where the paraprofessional is working with a small group within the whole class, but now we're doing, virtual classes. And so you can't always do a small group within the large group setting. So that's been a challenge as well. I'm trying to think what else. Behavioral services. We have a wonderful group of behaviorists in our district, but they a lot of times are helping us provide ABA services, applied behavioral analysis. And that's something that's really challenging to do in an online platform when we typically have a paraprofessional taking data on a student. It's not as easy to do remotely. So those are just a few examples of some of the challenges that we've been facing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Jack, panel question 2.
Yeah, so I would start out with one of the big issues that, the classroom has changed. I think we were lucky that we're a Google-based school district. We've been using programs. We have a one-to-one initiative. So we've had laptops for students from grades 6 through 12. And in our district, we have enough laptop carts where everyone had a laptop, a Chromebook. So we've been able to at least provide that to them, because I know I've read in the news, there was districts that didn't have that. Of course, the challenges come when we get emails from parents that the laptop has crashed. We're still having some issues with, students going onto the wrong websites where we've got to kind of check them. Testing, obviously, as mentioned, has been, along with the other timelines, has been an issue for special ed. We're not allowed to do any of the individual testing for reevaluations. So we've had to I've sent out emails and letters to parents, just letting them know that those things are on pause right now. The timelines has been a huge concern overall for special education, because it's, that is the basis for what we do for a living. I think keeping the students engaged has been something I've heard from the teachers when they are doing virtual lessons. We moved to it probably a little more slowly than some other school districts. We originally set up, we were sending home things to the parents, packets for them to work on, checking in, and we just really moved to live, like a Google Meet, where people could see each other, the kids could do that. And that really took a couple weeks. We were kind of moving it phase by phase as we went through it. As I had mentioned, I think the biggest challenge for special ed is coordinating across the buildings, the level of needs of some of the students. I have self-contained classrooms in the district, so providing services to them. Related services, we did the same thing where we had started out, obviously we weren't allowed to do any of the teletherapy, so we were sending home packets, they were following up with them, but the issue was that there was, now we have parents trying to, do OT or PT or speech or counseling with their students. So until we were able to move to the teletherapy, that put up a big roadblock or challenge, I think, for everyone in special education. I think the biggest issue, or one of the issues that we had too, was I was getting flooded with emails, and I think my teachers were too, and child study team, of all these quote wonderful programs that were out there that we could start utilizing. And I had to kind of slow them down, because things that we didn't know anything about, people we'd never heard from, were sending us emails. Before teletherapy was reinstituted, I was getting emails from companies saying they could do teletherapy for us. So those kind of things became an issue where I had to kind of put the brakes on it a little bit and say, wait a minute, what's going on? So we're kind of got those things under control now, a lot of them, and we're moving step by step. But I think those were some of the big things that we looked at, initially.
Absolutely. I hear from both responses now, that stakeholder, the parents, now it's another part of our planning process on a daily basis, and that can pose some challenges and also be a benefit to us as well. I want to make sure our audience knows that you can chat in questions. I'm going to be going to question number 3 right now, and after question 3, I'm going to pause to take a look at what questions have been posed. Our guests today are more than willing to answer a few questions. We'll take a few questions, and also you can just use chat to share what your district is doing, sort of revolving around the current question. So we're going to pause in a moment if there's any questions and take them. So question number 3 would be, what do modifications and accommodations look like virtually? Jack, you mind taking the lead on this one?
Absolutely. Early on, one of the first things when we went to virtual learning, I sent an email to all the parents of students with IEPs, to all the parents of students that had 504 plans, just to let them know that we would be following the accommodations, modifications that were set forth in their plans. Again, whether it's an IEP or whether it was a 504 plan. We also had to then reach out to the teachers to talk to them about how they would implement some of those things. The easier ones, when you're assigning something and there's a timeline, 50% extra time, you could still do those things. We found some challenges with, if there's any evaluations, doing not so much a separate or different evaluation, but doing it maybe not with the other students. So we've had to set up multiple classrooms. We've had to just change some things around, but the message that's gone out to the community, that's also went out to all of the teachers and my child study team, was that we're following the IEPs and the 504 plans, as appropriate as we can. It does pose some challenges, but we have been able to do the majority of those things. As far as increasing private one-to-one sessions, we're following what's in the plan, so we haven't changed anything to, if it was the IEP had something about it, we would follow exactly what's in there as far as the related services. The issue that we did find was integrated sessions. So if we have IEPs that had maybe the speech therapist or the occupational therapist in an integrated session, in the past, that was quite easy for the therapist to go into a classroom, sit down with a second grader, or behind them, kind of watch what they're doing, and show them a new pencil grip or look at how they're writing, give them suggestions. So that's one of those things that we've had to really think about, how we're doing integrated sessions in the classroom. What we've done for integrated sessions, we actually have the therapist actually sitting in the Google Classroom, watching them, and then providing feedback, touching base with the teacher and the parent. So that way they could say, these are some of the things I would have said if I was in the classroom. So they are integrating it. I think my OT and some of my other therapists struggled with that at first, because they're so used to being able to just, walk over to the student, when you're doing it virtually, you're kind of watching them do it, and you can't jump into a classroom to tell them without everyone hearing. So it's been a little bit of a challenge. We're kind of doing that in two pieces. But yeah, we've been following everything. If an IEP or 504 plan says it, we're following it to the best of our ability.
And Dr. Castorina, you alluded to some of what I'm sure you'll include in your response to question number 3 when you mentioned, kind of conceptualizing what now these one-on-one meetings look like. So I'm very curious, how have you all begun to integrate modifications and accommodations virtually?
So similar to Jack, there are some that are, Jack talked about the extended time. There are some that are so much easier than others. So there are, we can provide the audio. We have Learning Ally where the students can listen to the book that they're reading or the passage that they're reading. But there are others that are more challenging. So those individual, the IEP is so individual to a student's needs. We may do a group session or a class that is more general, and then break out into different appointment times where the teachers can meet with each student individually. It does pose a challenge when the teacher is a middle or high school teacher and has 60 to 70 students, but they are managing somehow to have those individual chats or sessions. They're not long, but at least they're doing some individual work with those students to perhaps reteach or modify a lesson so that the student can gain the skills that they need to move on. We're basically repeating what the state and is saying, that we are going to provide those accommodations to the best, greatest extent possible, and that we are going to do everything we can to offer the accommodations and to modify what we need to modify based on the student's IEP. But we're going to do the best we can, and we're trying to document as much as we can so that we don't have to go back and guess as to what we provided. So we're trying to document when a student is not available for services or for a related service, so that we know what we've offered and what we haven't been able to offer. But really, we're just doing the best we can with the situation we've been faced with, and trying our best to not only instruct on the student's level, but to monitor the progress that the student is able to make.
Mm-hmm. Quick follow-up question. You mentioned documenting everything that you're doing, and question popped in my head in terms of teacher collaboration. How often are you all meeting during the week? What does that schedule look like for your collaboration as a staff?
Sure. So we meet with similar to Jack, we're meeting with our child study team once a week. We also meet with our board attorney to make sure that we are following, the guidelines that we're supposed to follow. And in addition to that, we have 5 school buildings in our district. We're meeting with each group. Special education teachers are meeting together once a week. So that's pre-K through 12. We have different meetings, set up for different buildings. But in addition to that, we're asking the content area supervisors to include our special educators in those meetings as well. So if you're a special education English teacher, you really need to be included in that English department meeting to know what's been taken out of what's been modified within the curriculum for the rest of the year. We don't want a special education teacher teaching content that the general education teacher has decided not to do. So we're making sure we are in line with the general education practices as well. So we're meeting once a week. We also, Jack mentioned his self-contained teachers. We're meeting with the self-contained teachers as well, and including the behaviorists in those meetings. So I don't know how much longer we can sustain the once a week with all of the educators, but we're trying our best to do that so that we can provide support to the teachers as much as possible, as well as with the child study team.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Chris, I'd like to.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Jack. Go ahead.
I was just going to add in. I think we're also doing the same. We've been in close contact with the board attorney, who has been wonderfully supportive as we have questions. They're kind of steering us, and we're following it. I've also been using my county roundtable. In Essex County, we have a roundtable of directors. We usually have a monthly meeting. We've been chatting and getting information, obviously, from our county supervisor, but there's a group of directors, and maybe there's 6 or there's actually 7 of us that meet once a week as a group for us just to talk. So, what are they doing, kind of like what we're doing now. But, so we don't have to recreate the wheel on things that they were doing, or if they found issues, trying to stay in front of things. I think that's been the big challenge, is trying to stay a little bit ahead of them. So I'm just going to add, that's, what we've also been doing.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much for that. We have a third guest here. I really like to get that take more. Chris, can you hear me okay? Chris
Yes.
Casamento?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, David.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. It's completely our pleasure. I'm really curious as to your take on this question here.
So, as a classroom teacher, I'm in-class resource or in-class support, and I teach math, 7th, 8th grade math. So I honestly can say that not much has changed as far as the modifications that we provide to students. I'm still modifying assignments, modifying tests, working collaboratively with the classroom, with my classroom teachers in doing so. And then Google Classroom has an option where you can just present to a certain amount. So if we've 5 kids in the class and there's 8 special ed kids, I can just assign a separate assignment or a modified assignment to those 8 students. And, the other students won't know that, who's getting what. Does that make sense? So we've been successful in doing that. As far as New Brunswick has a one-to-one initiative as well, and also, we're a Google district, so we were pretty fast. We got up and running pretty quickly. Our district provided professional development on the Monday. We had a half a day, and the Monday before we left, I want to say that was the 8th or 9th, whatever that Monday was. They provided professional development, for us, and really we got to explore Google Meets and Zoom and things like that, different ways to present to the students. So, and then that Thursday we had an emergency meeting where they further went over the procedures, and they have continually changed, but we are meeting with our students on Google Meet. We're recording those meetings so that the students, if they can't attend, let's say from 10 to 11, that they can go back and watch the recorded version of the class. Being a higher need district, our kids, maybe at the park getting their lunch or their meals for the day, or they're taking care of their kids because their parents are out working. So it's not as easy to sort of lock our kids down at one time. So we're required to record the class and then post it and make it available for our students during the week. So I think that's, an accommodation as well. Trying to think of what else. I also, with my special ed students, I have been able to meet with them separately, either as a group, let's say 7 or 8 kids, or individually. I've also met individually. If a student has, a test that needs to be read to them, if that's in their IEP, I'll go on one-on-one with that student and sort of be there to, rephrase and repeat directions, things like that. So they get it, both visually and auditorily as well. I'm available on email, Google Classroom all day. I also have a Google Meet link with all my classes where they can come on at any time during the day. I'm going to make myself available till about 3:30 every day. So that's extended time. I heard both of the other presenters talk about that. That's easy. Obviously, we've extended the time that they have to complete a task. So that's really, I hope I haven't left anything out, but that's the meat and potatoes of what we're really doing now.
Yeah, and so you said that you're use Google Classroom just during traditional instruction, in normal circumstances. And so what I'm wondering is, do you feel like, since you've been using technology tools as sort of already implemented into your teaching strategy, what if you hadn't had that experience. How difficult do you think it would have been to then just turn around and go virtual? Do you think that
Right.
experience? Yeah.
It would have definitely made it more difficult. I can speak, I have 3 children who are at home, learning remotely as well. And my 5th grader has really hasn't had much issues. She had a lot of her teachers were using Google Classroom, and it was smooth for her. But my 3rd and 2nd grader really had a difficult time. I would say they used it, but how much they used it is the question. So as far as their district too, we really haven't had a lot of online sessions. My 2nd grader is senior teachers. I don't believe that my 3rd and 5th grader have, but my kids are a little more self-sufficient as far as that goes. They didn't have a one-on-one initiative either, so that made it more difficult. But they did put out a survey to see, who has technology available and who doesn't, so that, we responded to that survey, and then they handed out devices to the families that didn't in my home district, not New Brunswick, obviously. New Brunswick had a one-to-one initiative. So you could see how that took a little longer to sort of get up and running. The instruction was there through Google Classroom, but it hasn't really been a face-to-face situation. Does that make sense? So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting
I don't know how other districts are handling it throughout the state, but I know I spoke to relatives in other states, and I know New Jersey is far ahead of other states in instruction as far as that is concerned. I think we're probably a model state, as far as what I'm hearing from other relatives in other states, nieces and nephews who aren't even really getting any education at all.
Absolutely. Yeah. The importance of just using technology tools in a traditional setting is just so apparent now that we might have to go virtual at moment's notice, and using them when times are quote unquote normal is a great help when you have to switch like this. So we're going to pause really quick and see what questions we have. Matt, do we have some questions from chat?
Yeah, David. Yeah, going back to, just when we were talking about modifications, Connor Scott had a question here. So how are your districts addressing related service partners mandates? And are they meeting obligations outlined in IEPs, or are they reducing minutes, collapsing groups, etc.? Any thoughts on that?
We are following IEPs. So if the IEP says 30 minutes of speech, the students are receiving 30 minutes of speech. What I did once the change came from the state, which was a few weeks ago, I sent an email to every parent of a child with an IEP, and also included a Google form with them that was telling them, I needed their permission to switch the therapy from sending home a packet and, the getting an email and a check-in to a virtual session. So I've required that they complete that form and send it back to me. And as we're doing that, I update that. What I created with, for all of my related therapy, for all of my for my therapists that provide related therapy, I created one massive Google spreadsheet, gave them each a tab. Our hours with the students, there's a 4-hour block each day. So I had them go in and put the students into their blocks to make sure we could do that. And then as the responses came in, my secretary or I are changing them over so we know who we can work with virtually, who we're still, doesn't want to be virtual, they want a packet sent home. So we keep, shifting into that. We've had a relatively, 99% of the parents have wanted to move over to that interaction, being able to see somebody, being able to talk with them. We've had just 1 or 2 that has not wanted that. So we've taken it step by step, but I had required all of the parents to sign off that we're making a change.
And I can just add that we're doing the best we can to follow the IEP. So if the student is met with twice a week for speech, we are trying to offer that. Perhaps a parent says, I can only do this once a week. And so we're just documenting those types of things. If the parent says, I can only handle one, we've had situations where parents have been, perhaps the parent is a healthcare worker, or the parent is a teacher, or the parent is, you know, a police officer. And so there's only so much that they can do to support their child at home. So we are doing the best we can with providing, to the greatest extent possible, what the IEP says, but there are certainly some situations where a parent is declining the service. And so, you know, as I said before, we're trying to document and keep track of all of that, but again, we are, you know, readily available and reaching out to parents via email or phone call, or perhaps the case manager is helping us to reach that parent. But it is certainly not the easiest task in the world to get everybody on board, but we are seeing some successes.
Yeah, and David, we had another question here in group here about just anonymity, confidentiality. You know, I know I've worked with Jack quite a bit on their implementations, and you know that Jack has been you know, really careful with the information going out to parents, students, etc. Can you guys talk a little bit more about how you would deal with the confidentiality and or anonymity of your special education students in the Zoom setting, and what the law says about that in New Jersey?
So I can respond to some of that. Our teachers have been advised to be extremely careful with just personal information. So they are, you know, being advised not to share information from one student to the other when they're in a group setting, not to be revealing any personal information about a student. We're also aware that there are parents that could be in the background, especially of our younger students. And so they're trying to keep the instruction going, but in more of a general sense. And I did speak before about those individual sessions or those individual office hour type experiences where the teacher is then able to really hone in on the specific IEP goals and objectives with the student in a one-to-one setting, but not in that larger group. It's a challenge, but they're certainly being asked not to be aware of what you are saying and sharing. As somebody mentioned before, I think Chris said he's recording his session. So we are asking the teachers to record in case a student can't check in at that specific time that they're doing their large group lesson. So be really mindful of that too, that when you're being recorded, you know, a parent can replay that. And so just being mindful of your situation and being just, you know, careful not to share individual needs and you know, IEP information, of course.
All right, thank you so much. Fantastic questions. We're going to move on to panel question 4, and we'll pause again, probably just after question 6. We do want to be mindful of everybody's time. We were slated for about an hour. We're going to do our best to get through everything within that time. So let's jump to the next question. Question 4, Jack, how are you supporting parents to meet the needs of your special education students?
So we have set up times for the parents to be able to call in, whether it's, you know, so basically our school day looks similar to what it normally would, except for the students are on a half-day schedule. So for example, let's say one of our buildings would be 8 to 3:30 for staff. The students are there 8:30 to 12:30. So the time before and then time after, we've set up times for the parents to be able to contact the teacher, reach out if they've got questions, being able to answer those questions. You know, we recognize that, you know, the majority of the world is not educators. We are. So, you know, it's sometimes for whether it's a teacher and they're not understanding what to do, or they're trying to implement they saw a speech session and they're trying to do something or add something to it, we've tried to make sure that the parents have access to the teachers, and I've tried to make sure that the teachers actually have access to each other, because they have a lot of wonderful things. Some of them are much better on technology, and they've been able to support other teachers who have not used Google Classroom as much in the past, or Google Meets. We've been we've been using Google in the district for many years, but at the high school level, junior, senior high school level, they're using that quite a bit. It really had not trickled down, especially to our lower buildings. So it was something new for all of our K-2 students and teachers. So sometimes it's just making sure that the teachers, the parents, they know what to do, how to access it, things like that. I think, also staying in close contact with everyone has been helpful. Again, my CPAC, we meet, we talk. I get a lot of feedback from them to find out, maybe the things that they would not say to a teacher, or concerns that they might have, just to make sure that we're addressing them, or we can find ways to address those things.
Thanks, Jack. Dr. Castorina.
Sure. So it's really a team effort. So when I think about an IEP team, I think it's not just the case manager, but it's the teacher and the related service provider. And of course, the parent is a huge part of that. And so our teachers have been reaching out to parents. In addition to that, if there are issues reaching a parent, our child study team, as well as our guidance counselors, are reaching out. And so it's just a team effort, making sure the parents really have what they need. If there's information that they communicate, perhaps there's a sick family member and the parent is not able to assist the child, that is typically communicated to the principal, and the principal, keeping confidentiality in mind, does communicate it to the case manager and to the teacher. And so it's having an open communication, as well as using the team approach to make sure that we are supporting not only our students, but our parents at the same time.
Absolutely. Keeping all lines of communication open, being collaborative. We're going to move on to the next question. I'm going to ask this of all three of our panelists. We're going to start with Dr. Castorina, then Jack, and then Chris. How are you motivating students to do their work? That's an easy question, isn't it, Doctor?
Yeah, I mean, we still have students who are not checking in, who are not going on the Google Classrooms. And so what we're doing is not only as just a special education department, but as a district, we're trying to come up with spirit days. Our poor seniors, we're thinking about them, and we're trying to have them send pictures in so that we can share those pictures. We're having teachers reading on Twitter or reading on their sites so that the students can see and hear them. So anything that we can do to try to connect with our students, we feel is going to be a motivating factor. Keeping just those check-ins and the communication going, but certainly it's not easy. Students are going through a lot of different things that we may not know about. So just trying to make sure that they know that they have our support and that we're there for them is really the approach that we're taking.
Thank you, Jack.
Yeah, I think that what was probably helpful for us, our rollout, like I said earlier, was we didn't go right to the live interaction. So there was, at first, students were receiving the materials, they were doing work, but there wasn't that visual. They weren't seeing the students or the teachers. And I think that was something that when we did move to that, a week or two into it, and again, for our lower buildings, it took a little time because they had never done that. That's something that I've heard from all of the teachers, special ed and regular ed, the related therapists, that seeing, that the people has been wonderful. I know for myself, when I set up my meetings, it's great to, phone calls are wonderful, but seeing people's faces for a couple minutes is very helpful. So I think that really helped motivate the students, kind of getting them back together. They're so used to going where they want to, when they want to, and now being, confined to their house or, wherever it might be, it's difficult. So at least seeing the people, their friends, their peers has been helpful. Our principals have been wonderful. something that was just mentioned. They've been sending out messages, positive messages to the students, building challenges, for example. We did a spirit week. One day it was everybody find their Halloween costume, and the kids were on their meets with that. So it's finding ways to keep them engaged and interested in it. They did a crazy hat day. They did a crazy sock day. They've done all different things, definitely building wide. That has been, or grade wide, that's been helpful. They've also found some virtual, I'm going to call them fun activities too. They've tried to keep some of it, not just the learning, but just also keeping them engaged with some other things. So taking tours of museums or sharing with them, things that they've done different. I know someone did a tour of, I think it was Disney or something like that. They found rides that the kids could like take a virtual Disney trip one day. So they've tried to do things that were keeping them more engaged, rather than just, okay, it's language arts time, it's math time. They've tried to find things that will pull them back into it. And, if they have their parents, keeping their parents as part of the messages. I think one of the things that was really helpful, I put together a video. I had all of our special education teachers, pretty much anyone who's in my student services department, child study team members, so, the therapists, secretaries, reading specialists, and I asked them to send us a sign with, 3 words, they would want to share with their students. Put together, it came out to about a 4-minute video, and we sent that out, and I got a lot of great responses from the parents and the students. We sent it to the parents, but they, it was for them to share with them. And it was really about them seeing that, we're here, we still care about them, and, trying to keep that link there with them that maybe some of these teachers had prior to this, and, you're trying to reestablish, but virtually.
So those are great ideas, by the way, Jack, and I'm going to try to bring some of those back to our district. But as far as keeping the students motivated, I would say that's the hardest part to do remotely. You're not in front of them. You don't get to see the emotion on their face or the frustration. That's difficult. A lot of the kids, I didn't point this out last time, but when we're on the video, the kids obviously have the option to not show their faces, so we can hear them, they can ask questions, but we can't see them. Very few of the students will take the video option. So that's difficult, but, and we don't have full participation either. I mean, we're still trying to get, I'd say out of my classes, we're probably in the 65% range, maybe a little higher, but that's been difficult. But our support staff, our guidance counselors, our child study team members have been reaching out, as well as us, but they've been reaching out to the kids, doing wellness checks. We have a lot of other struggles in New Brunswick that the students are dealing with. So, but they've been doing knocking, I think at some point, even going to check on people if we can't get a hold of them. I don't know to what extent, but that's my understanding. So that's difficult. And I think that, the spirit days, things like that would help. But visually, I think the kids getting to see us, I think there's comfort there. And just listening to them, are you okay? I always ask my students, are you okay? Is everything all right? And that's it. No, I'm not trying to pry, but you can't learn if you're not, you're not okay. So I think that's a difficult thing during this time. But thanks for sharing that stuff. I appreciate it.
And I agree with you, Chris. I recently, on the Edmentum podcast, I interviewed a gentleman that works for the Alberta Health Mental Literacy Project. And one of the things that he says, the importance right now of touching base with our students and asking them those questions. Are you able to go outside? Are you able to see your friends? How are you doing? You eating okay, right? And so I think we're all sort of, really getting a hold of this, how important communication is, not only just communication, but the new conversations we might need to have to continue to connect in a meaningful way. We're going to go on to question 6, which is our last question. Actually, it's not our last question. We have 7 questions, don't we? So I'm gonna try to shorten this one, right? Because we've got some questions from the audience. We're kind of running out of time a little bit here, so I'm gonna kind of shorten question 6. I'm gonna put this to Dr. Castorina and Jack. One way, or if you could pick one way to say that this is key. How are you supporting your special educators? One way, would you say?
So I think just giving them the venue to express how they're doing. So, you know, it could be in a larger group meeting, but what I'm finding when I do those meetings is that afterwards I'll get a text from 4 or 5 teachers and they'll say, can we speak with you in a smaller group setting? And so I think providing them the support that they need, the validation that they need, the, you know, just being able to listen to them and to let them know that we're here for them, that they're, you know, they're not alone, that they have support, and that it's okay to say, I need help, has been, I think, the most important. I do have to just add, I feel like staying on top of there's so many broadcasts that are coming out from the NJDOE or from the Office of Special Education Programs, and just continuing to be informed so that you can answer their questions appropriately has been really important as well. So providing them a place where they can talk, express their frustrations or their challenges, as well as providing them answers when they need it.
Fantastic. Were you able to hear me?
No, I'll just jump in. I agree. I think it's been communication has been the key. Staying in contact with them, listening to what's going on, and that's why, you know, I would, like I said, I would normally not meet with the special education teachers on a regular basis like this, but listening to them, finding out what's working for them, and then sometimes sharing resources with other buildings has been great, because, you know, if you give them the tools, then they're able to work with their students. So we've been able to sometimes see things that we were using at the high school that might help our, you know, 5th or 6th grade students, and making sure we're sharing that. So we've had a lot of communication, so that way they could share, you know, what's working, what's not working. And that's usually what I start out with when I'm talking to them. I give them the updates. Not only, you know, special education teachers might not always get what the child study team updates are in the past, but when I start out, you know, they know what the role of the child study team is right now. That's part of our discussion. And with the teachers, I'm also sharing with them the updates that come out from the state. You know, as teletherapy came across, that was one of the first things I started that discussion with, was that, you know, just so you know, these people are going to be reaching out to you, the speech therapist, to find out what your schedule is, so they might jump in for an integrated session or schedule around when you are there. So I think it's listening to the special educators and finding ways to help them, support them, and then really giving them the tools that they need, because this is, you know, it's a new world order for all of us, but especially them. They're on the front line, and we have to find ways to support them so they can support their students.
Awesome. Let's go to the chat. Matt, do we have a couple questions that we can share with our guests?
First of all, if you haven't read the chat, there's a great discussion, kind of sidebar going on about differentiation, specifically on the secondary and high school level. But one question that is kind of, we had left unresolved is, so in the context of small group pullout classes, you know, the question here is, you know, about using video or Zoom setup for instruction. You know, what specifically should we be doing? What are others doing to, you know, protect those students and confidentiality within a small group pullout?
So I think Chris mentioned this before, about having different assignments on the Google Classroom, and the students can't see every assignment perhaps. So, you know, our teachers are required to do at least one classroom live session a week at least. And so I've been advising them to really keep that as general as possible, because you might have a student who's on unit 5 in the math book, but then there might be the other students who are on unit 8, and you don't want to be pointing out who's where and et cetera. And again, we're thinking about parents in the background, and we want to keep everybody's confidentiality intact. So perhaps being more general in that larger group setting, but then in the individuals trying to really reach the students on their level and instructing them on their level is something that we've been trying, and it's been working out. And I do love that Chris mentioned how the Google Classroom, you can assign different, you can put different assignments for different students or different groups of students. And I think that's really important, that technology does allow us to do that, and can keep some of the assignments discrete.
I would just add, we did email out to all of the parents that, and this was actually to all the parents even before the special ed parents for changing over, to let them know that, the students would still be required to have the expectations, that are in the student manual. So, being mindful of other people's feelings, being mindful of sharing things. So we let the parents and students know that. And then what we've done for the Google Classrooms, we have set them up so that way, if it was a resource room with these 5 students, we're continuing to do that. So only those students really have access to it. And just being mindful of who we're putting together, trying to recreate, what we're doing in the classroom. And if it is an alternative assignment, the teachers are sending them separate. If it's a modified assignment or a test or something, they're, in let's say a mainstream class with in-class support, we would have it sent to them separately. We might have the the paraprofessional that was in there stepping out and going to a different room with them, or a Google Classroom with them, somewhere that they could sit and talk or go over or support them with what they're doing. So we've been very mindful to make sure that the students' confidentiality is there.
Matt, did you have another question, or should we move forward?
Yeah, I think we can move forward.
All right, fantastic. This is our last question here, and it's a biggie. All right. How will this impact the future of special education? Jack, I see you've got some ideas. I can't wait to hear what we've got. Go ahead, Jack. Go ahead.
I think that's the beauty of education and special education teachers in general. They are a very resourceful bunch. They are fantastic with what they do. They are resourceful in finding things. So, I think we've been able to do that. They've helped us a lot with that. I think, not so much the direct interaction. I think, when we get back to brick and mortar and we're back in schools, our students will transition. Kids are resilient. They will get back to where they need to. I have other concerns that, with special education in general, which I'm sure every director and, anyone who's involved in special ed has. Evaluating our students is probably my biggest concern right now. Initial evaluations, which have been put on hold. We usually at this time of year, we're getting a handful of new cases coming in, probably more than a handful, but we're getting students coming out of I&RS. They need supports. So we're trying to find ways for us to, what are we going to do for those students? Because there is right now a delay. If anyone was the 90-day evaluation period for an initial evaluation and they were 60 days in and they haven't gotten anything, everything's on pause, but those students aren't getting support. So we've found other ways to support them, or we've been trying to, but I think those are my biggest concerns, are the students that would be getting help and might not be right now, in a smaller setting.
And I would say, in terms of how this impacts the future of special education, I am curious if we would, in the future, be able to provide the teletherapy that we're doing now. So for example, when we have a student out on home instruction, we typically, we're sending the speech therapist out, or we're sending, people out to the home. And I'm wondering if that may change. I'm not sure, you know, of the effectiveness. We're doing what we're being asked to do, and we're doing it to the best of our ability. But I wonder in the future if that will change. I also wonder, just in education in general in the state of New Jersey, we have not been able to use days like this. They haven't counted towards our 180 days. And I wonder if in the future, if we have snow days, if the state will allow us to use this type of learning platform to count as a day. So I think there are a lot of unknowns, and with special education specifically, we typically don't do phone IEP meetings or you know, Google Hangouts with IEP meetings. And I don't know if that will happen more. I'm not sure, but I think, you know, time will tell.
Chris?
Yeah, I was thinking of IEP meetings myself because I've attended a few in this setting, and I you know, I guess if it works, then you can move in that direction. But I think as far as, and I had this discussion with my wife, as far as virtual learning, I think at the, you know, K through 12 level, I don't think you're going to see that anytime soon because of the work schedule of other people. You know, we both work. You know, what in the world will we do with a second and third grader during the day? So we are going back to school. There's no doubt in my mind, and I hope that happens. But what it looks like, that's it's an interesting question, no doubt about it. I think you brought up an excellent point with the teletherapy, I believe it was.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that. Homeschooling may look different. Maybe more kids will get homeschooled if they can't behaviorally, you know, if that setting's not the proper setting, maybe that's a bit, you know, that I could see something like that maybe happening. But as far as the majority of our students, you know, I think we'll be, you know, it'll be business as usual when we can. I hope so anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you all for fantastic responses. I thank Dr. Castorina, Jack, and Chris again for these wonderful, wonderful insights. I also thank our attendees for joining and having such a great discussion and such great questions. I'm going to hand it off to Matt, who's going to cover the rest of the session.
Yeah, hi. Thanks again, everybody. Great questions, great interaction. Thank you to our panelists as well. So the last piece here that we wanted to throw out is we are doing these events, and we want to make sure that we collect them. We think the timing is right for this, and we also, you know, if we have resources that we're creating, you know, we'd love to have a landing page and a place to collect all that. So we put together a YouTube page that's, we actually don't have a video up yet. This will probably be the first one. And we'll go back through our archives and take everything that we're using, and we'll put resources up here. We will probably feature some things that we do as Edmentum and some of our programs and resources, but I think also just this PLC type you know, connection that that has happened by means of just the distance learning you know, challenge that we've had here now for the past month. This is going to be a great place to collect these ideas and keep this going. So if you're interested, you can find it right now on, you know, you can just search Edmentum, New Jersey. I put the link up there, but we'll send that out in an email as a follow-up to this, as well as a copy of this video that'll be up in the cloud. And the other piece of this is we'd love to keep the questions coming. We want to be doing one of these every other week around this time in the afternoon. So the next idea is we're just talking about summer learning, and I think that's probably on everybody's plate right now as far as, you know, there's a little bit of uncertainty or people are getting ahead of that right now. So, you know, go ahead and put some questions into the chat right now. Share those questions or uncertainty pieces with us, and or you know, when we send out the links to this, you can reply even in email. But if you want to get some questions in the chat right now, we would collect those and get ahead of this next session, and we will have another set of panelists and Edmentum partners that we'll bring in for that. And, keep your eyes out for invites probably by the end of the week for that event.